Well, good morning, and it is very early morning, one and all. Starting just a minute early, there's nobody who's tuned in yet. For those of you watching on tape delay, I'm not sure what to call that. This is Emperor Norton's Fantastic History Vlog, number 21, I believe it is, or 20, check below. It's early, folks, because today is, of course, the 114th anniversary of the great San Francisco earthquake and fire. Normally, on this day, there would be a crowd of about 200 of us gathering at Lotta's Fountain on Market Street. There's a little photograph of it. Been there since 1875. Gift to the people of San Francisco from Lotta Crabtree, a popular performer of that era. Chose as the spot to have the annual commemoration because it was one of the only structures, left intact downtown after the great earthquake and fire, and people looking for lost loved ones would place notes upon it. So normally we're there every year, as we have been since the 1920s when the commemorations started, but we're not able to this year because, of course, of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are all ordered to shelter in place, and that's what we're doing today. We are not at Lotta's Fountain. There was a misconception going around that we were going to be there this morning. No, I hope no one's there. But we are in the basement of the Imperial Palace, live vlogging this morning. So thanks. I see there's some people joining us already. Thanks for getting up early and doing this. Today's vlog is dedicated to a lot of people who have been helping in our current situation. Healthcare workers, the guardians of the city, the fire department, the police, the EMTs, etc. Our city workers, the Department of Public Works, the mayor, the board of supervisors, also the people that work in the grocery stores, the people who deliver our food, deliver our goods, keeping us safe during this difficult time. Our hat is off to all of them this morning, as well as to all of you for tuning in. So here's how this is going to work this morning. I'm going to be reading from a rather wonderful article I came across, very well written, by Eric Niederrost in the April 2006 issue of American History magazine. So this was actually written for the centennial of what we are commemorating today, the great San Francisco earthquake and fire of 1906, the defining moment in San Francisco's history, and that's why we commemorate it every morning. Well, since we couldn't be there in person, we thought we would do something virtual because we felt it was important that something at least be done, but be done in a safe way. So, I suppose, well, before we do that, we're going to talk about San Francisco before the earthquake, and the beginning part of this is going to last about a half hour, probably at the most. And then we will have a moment of silence at 5:12, the exact moment of the great earthquake, and then continue on with what happened after that. Hopefully, got a lot of information to cover, but hopefully we'll get through it all in the next half hour. And I see more people have joined us. Thank you for getting up so early on a Saturday morning and tuning in. So let's begin with a little bit from the article. In the spring of 1906, San Francisco was a city boasting 410,000 inhabitants, a world-class metropolis whose citizens, the dawn of the new century, looked forward with a sense of civic pride and growing confidence. San Francisco's very existence was a triumph of the imagination over reality. In 1846, the site was largely barren sand dunes fringed with wind-stunted oaks and populated mainly by billions of fleas that tormented man and beast alike. We had a population of 500 in 1847, swelling to 30,000 by 1851 because of the gold rush. This intense growth continued throughout the 19th century. In 1906, Market Street was San Francisco's main artery, a 120-foot wide thoroughfare that showcased some of the city's most impressive landmarks. Americans couldn't help but be awed by what had been accomplished in a mere 60 years. The Union Ferry Depot, simply known as the Ferry Building by most locals, anchored the eastern end of Market Street. Since San Francisco was on the tip of the peninsula, the ferry building was one of the city's major gateways. Its clock tower, which was inspired by the Giralda, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing that, bell tower in Seville, Spain, spiked the sky above the waterfront like an exclamation point. The Palace Hotel is another jewel in the Market Street crown, the largest and most luxurious hotel on the West Coast. Opened in 1875, it boasted 800 well-appointed rooms and rose an impressive 7 stories high. It was the interior that awed most visitors, featuring a central grand court surrounded by tier after tier of columned galleries and crowned by a domed ceiling of amber-colored glass. The hotel was the brainchild of William Ralston, one of San Francisco's earliest boosters. Equal parts hard-headed businessman, robber baron, and dreamer, Ralston knew the area was vulnerable to earthquakes. In 1865 and 1868, the Bay Area had been shaken by temblors, and Ralston was determined to protect his creation from the capricious forces of nature. 3,000 tons of earthquake-proof iron banding strengthened the 2-foot thick walls. Ralston knew that fire was a danger, so he left nothing to chance. There was a 358,000-gallon sub-basement reservoir beneath the Grand Court, and also 6 water tanks on the hotel's iron roof. Hoses were stored on each floor to allow bellboys to fight any blaze. As a final touch, no less than 12 fire hydrants just outside the hotel on Market and New Montgomery Streets were linked to the roof tanks. And we see some more people have joined us, so thank you very much. We're just talking a little bit about life before the Great Earthquake, before April 18, 1906. And also for those of you recently joining us, today's live vlog is dedicated to the people who guard our city, the police, the fire department, the EMTs, the nurses, the healthcare workers who are helping us get through this crisis, also the people who deliver our groceries, the checkers in the stores, all those people who are helping us get through this very, very troubled time. So thank you very much for tuning in, everybody, and thank them next time you see them. It's very important to do that. Passing the 18-story Carl Spreckles building at 3rd and Market, a visitor would soon find himself at a triangle of land bounded by Market, Larkin, and McAllister Streets. This was the Civic Center, whose centerpiece was San Francisco's new City Hall. The building was contracted by the city in 1871, but cost overruns. Dig a little bit more into that. Seasoned with corruption on a massive scale, delayed its completion for decades. During that period, the partially finished building, its exposed steel girders looked like a forlorn skeleton, was soon dubbed the new City Hall ruin. That's very ironic. It was finally completed and occupied by 1900. Turn of the century, San Francisco was a cosmopolitan city with one of the most ethnically diverse populations in the country. Only a few blocks north of Market Street was Chinatown, a district widely known as the largest Chinese community outside Asia. The official 1900 census recorded some 11,000 Chinese living within Chinatown, but the real figure was probably 25,000 or more. Chinatown was both a thriving, self-sufficient community and a gilded ghetto, a bastion of Chinese culture, an expression of white racism that forbade Asians to live anywhere else. San Francisco's new maturity was manifested in the arts, where it ranked along Chicago or even New York City. On April 17, 1906, the great Italian tenor Enrico Caruso opened in Carmen at the Grand Opera House on Mission Street. He was scheduled to sing La Boheme the next day, Thursday, and Faust on the following Saturday. Carmen was a great success, and after the performance, Caruso returned to his suite at the Palace Hotel, a happy man. We were indeed the Paris of the West, a thriving metropolis, flush with money from the gold rush, silver rush, the financial services that had settled into San Francisco, a beautiful, beautiful city. If you've never seen the film of A Trip Down Market Street by Cable Car, look it up on the YouTube, which this will be posted on later on. This will be posted on all social media, by the way. And it was taken just a few days before the great earthquake and fire would destroy everything that you see. And just a wonderful, wonderful film. There are a number of versions of it. There's a recent colorized one that was slowed down to the proper speed. So it's 5:09 right now. We have a few more minutes to go before the actual moment of the great earthquake at 5:12. And I see we're up to 13 people joining us this morning. Thank you so much for getting up so early to remember our city's history. We believe that is important. Where is the salute button? Thank you very much, Jim. We don't have one, but you're welcome to maybe give a thumbs up or something like that. We just talk a little bit more about Chinatown. To most whites, Chinatown was an exotic place of Oriental mystery where one could shop for Chinese trinkets, gawk at real or alleged opium dens, eat at a Chinese restaurant, or simply stroll the streets taking in the colorful shops and temples festooned with Chinese characters and bulbous lanterns. To most whites, Chinatown was an exotic place of Oriental mysteries. Oh, I already said that. But Chinatown was also, I talked about that already too. Sorry about that. We're sort of flying by the seat of our pants this morning. So a very quiet town. People were just waking up or about ready to wake up about now, 114 years ago. No one suspected what would strike in just a few moments. We're getting closer to 5:12. We got about another 2 minutes to go. We were indeed the Paris of the West. A thriving, beautiful city, as we said earlier, and of course that would all be destroyed in the great earthquake and fire, which we'll talk about in just a couple of moments. Back to Lotta's Fountain. It was a gift to the people from Lotta Crabtree, a popular performer, in 1875. I did pull up a picture of what it looked like. Excuse the modern technology this morning, but this is where we would normally be this morning, if I can get this to work right. Oh, well, you can see it this way. Oops, if we were able to. There we go. Beautiful, beautiful Lotta's Fountain. The water would be running. There'd be about 200 to 300 of us there, as there are every year. Well, it's 5:11, so we need to get ready for the actual moment. What we're going to do at 5:12 is a moment of silence, as we do every year at the earthquake commemoration. And I will ring a bell to begin it, and then ring a bell as well as the minute has passed. And that is approximately the amount of time of the earthquake. It was about 45 seconds. There was a foreshock followed by the great temblor itself. We know at the time there was no Richter scale. We will be talking about the intensity of the earthquake, but here it is, 5:12 a.m. Oops, that didn't sound right. Let's do that again. So, thank you all for the moment of silence, commemorating those lost in the great earthquake, as well as I said, our salute to those who are making our lives more comfortable these days in our time of need. At 5:12 a.m., Wednesday, April 18, 1906, San Franciscans were rudely awakened by a sharp jolt that lasted 45 seconds. This was a foreshock, an overture to a terrible symphony of destruction. About 10 to 12 seconds after the shaking subsided, the city was rocked by a far more powerful temblor that lasted some 45 to 60 seconds. The earthquake had come from the San Andreas Fault, a deep fissure in the Earth's crust that extends some 600 miles. In 1906, scientists could only speculate on why earthquakes occur, but now, thanks to the study of plate tectonics, we have a better idea of the forces that had been unleashed. The San Andreas Fault is the boundary between the Earth's North American plate to the east and the Pacific plate to the west. The Pacific plate is moving north, in the North American plate is moving south. The rate of creep is about 2 inches per year. The shaking was terrible, accompanied by a freight train rumble that was forever etched in the memories of survivors. It was estimated to be between 7.9 and 8.2 on the Richter scale. Buildings swayed crazily, their facades collapsed, draft horses galloped in blind terror, and brick walls tumbled into the street, raising acrid clouds of choking dust. At the Palace Hotel, Caruso literally got a rude awakening. The famed tenor remembered everything. The room was going round and round. The chandelier was trying to touch the ceiling. The chairs were chasing each other. Crash, crash, crash. It was a terrible scene. One of the first casualties was Fire Chief Engineer Dennis T. Sullivan, who was mortally wounded when a chimney from the California Theater smashed without warning into the fire station where he was living. The fire department, faced with the greatest crisis in its history, was effectively decapitated. Most of the city's residents were still in bed when the quake struck, but a few policemen, delivery wagon teamsters, and other early risers were witness to the initial impact. San Francisco Examiner reporter Fred Hewitt had just talked to 2 policemen when the shaking started. Fissures appeared as streets rose and fell and rose again in a rolling motion, the undulations making it seem as if the earth itself was, as Hewitt reported, breathing. To the casual eye, the quake damage seemed arbitrary, the whim of capricious nature. Some buildings were virtually intact while others were heavily damaged. Most depended on construction techniques, materials used, and above all, the makeup of the ground underneath. During the gold rush, parts of the bay had been filled in to create new real estate. This made ground, reclaimed land essentially, was landfill and had performed badly in previous major quakes. The made ground consisted of loose earth, old timbers, rocks, and other debris, and when shaking occurred, this hodgepodge lacked cohesion. Very strong temblors transformed landfill into soft, unstable pudding, a process known to science as liquefaction. City Hall was particularly hard hit, reduced to a ruin as the Greco-Roman columns that ring the dome fell away with much of the masonry facade in a matter of seconds. The building site had once been a marsh, the soft ground making any large building erected there vulnerable in a major earthquake. In this case, however, nature had been helped by the greed of city officials and contractors during the nearly 30-year span of the building's construction. In order to save money and to pocket government funds, shoddy materials were deliberately used. Old newspapers and trash had been incorporated into the building materials even before the Great Quake. City Hall's internal sewage had seeped into its basement, collecting in a stinking pool of filth. The stench of sewage was the perfect metaphor for the stench of corruption, seeping from the city's handsome facade. The densely populated south of Market area was also hit hard. It was largely a working-class district with small rooming houses and restaurants. Since City Hall was a total loss, a temporary command post was set up at the Hall of Justice near Portsmouth Square. Portsmouth Plaza, they call it here. When the quake hit, Mayor Eugene Schmitz was at his home at 2849 Fillmore Street, a short ride from the Hall of Justice, so he lost no time in reporting for duty. He'd been under a cloud lately, accused of graft and taking bribes, and this disaster was a chance for political salvation. But in city affairs, he really played second fiddle to political boss Abraham Roof. Roof was a Republican Party organizer who saw greater opportunities for riches by switching to the newly formed Union Labor Party, a master manipulator. Roof used Schmidt's handsome looks and Irish Catholic German roots to win votes. Although he was a charismatic speaker and charming family man, Schmitz was still considered a lightweight who did the bidding of his puppet master, Roof. The city's major reservoirs, Crystal Springs and Pilarcitos, were miles away to the south in San Mateo County. And this was very important because large and small fires had broken out all over the city. Some estimates suggest as many as 60 blazes. These fires had many causes, including broken chimneys, overturned stoves, crossed electric wires, and shattered gas mains. But when hard-pressed firemen attached hoses to hydrants, they found that, to their horror, there was little or no water available. Most hydrants only produced a weak sporadic trickle. before running completely dry. All the conduits that transported water to San Francisco were either near or actually crossed by the San Andreas Fault. And even if the reservoirs and aqueducts had emerged unscathed, it would not have made a difference. There were more than 300 water main breaks within the city. Tugs pumped seawater from the bay, which was fed into hoses to fight the fires along the waterfront. Freeman also pumped 5,000 gallons of fresh water from the tug Sotomayor's tanks into boilers of the fire engines desperately fighting the conflagration. And a lieutenant had the foresight to store 200 gallons in barrels for parched San Franciscans who were piteously crying for water. There's speaking here about Navy Lieutenant Frederick Newton Freeman, a temporary command of the Preble, sailed the destroyer on two tugboats active in Leslie to the stricken city. When the waterfront blazes were under control, Freeman offered assistance that helped save the area around Montgomery and Jackson Streets, today's Jackson Square. A hose snaked from the tug Leslie up and over Telegraph Hill, through Broadway to New Montgomery, now Columbus Avenue, and finally to the Jackson Square area. Freeman later commented that his men did their best work here. Leslie's precious conduit of salt water stretching over 11 city blocks. Because of Freeman and his men, a number of Gold Rush era buildings, some of San Francisco's oldest in the city, survive to this day. Since the fire department had few means to combat blazes, it was agreed that fire breaks would have to be created by ruthlessly dynamiting buildings that were in the path of the growing conflagration. Fire department officials were in favor of the new desperate tactic, and General Funston of the Presidio insisted it was the only way. Mayor Schmitz was not so sure, especially when the properties in question were owned by some of his supporters. In the end, Schmitz allowed himself to be persuaded, but orders were given to wait until the last possible moment before a building was blown. Unfortunately, both civilian firefighters and soldiers had little or no experience with explosives, and their clumsy efforts actually spread the fire. When dynamite stock ran low, Funston became obsessed with finding more. He didn't seem to know or care. The tugboats along the waterfront were helping combat the fire with their supplies of water. The general ordered that all such vessels be pulled out of the firefighting line and sent for more dynamite. The fabled Palace Hotel, iconic symbol of the Bay City, survived the earthquake, only to succumb to the fire. Guests like Enrico Caruso were shaken, windows were broken, and some of the interiors were wrecked. But the building seemed to have remained structurally sound. Fears that the palace would collapse and its floors pancake happily proved false. But ironically, the fire department siphoned off all the palace's water resources to fight waterfront blazes, and when the flames attacked the building in earnest, it was as helpless as its neighbors. The Call building, which still stands to this day, by the way, was also a fire victim. Steel frame buildings generally perform well in earthquakes, and the Call building was no exception. Unfortunately, it too was gutted by the Great Fire. The fires coalesced into three major blazes: south of Market, north of Market, and in the Hayes Valley. West of the shattered City Hall, fanned by high winds, this malevolent trio soon united to become one raging firestorm. The inferno grew so intense that temperatures reached upward of 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. Flames crackled and roared, producing a huge black column of smoke that some claimed rose 5 miles into the sky. The great city by the bay seemed doomed, immolated on its own funeral pyre. Van Ness Avenue, a broad thoroughfare that ran on a north-south axis, was a natural firebreak in the city's last major line of defense. There were still residential areas west of Van Ness that were relatively unscathed by the earthquake, but they would succumb to the fire. But would they succumb to the fire? Was a question. The Great Inferno jumped Van Ness in one or two places, but exhausted firefighters managed to hold the line. By Saturday, April 21st, the fire had essentially burned itself out. Not long after, a drenching rain fell too late to fight the fire, but welcome nonetheless. And of course, we know that the fire ultimately stopped at Church and 20th Streets, the top of Dolores Park, because they found a fire hydrant that still pumped water. And normally after the commemoration at Lotus Fountain, and I hope no one's there this morning, we told you not to go, we would go to the fire hydrant to paint it gold, as we do every year. So if you're not from here, ever in town, or if you're in town, if you live here, make sure to go to the corner of Church and 20th and you'll see the golden fire hydrant. And I'm sure it's still golden. The paint from last year is still quite good. When the coming months, relief and reconstruction were top priorities. No fewer than 514 city blocks, 4 square miles, had been destroyed by fire. An estimated 28,000 buildings had been consumed in the Great Fire, and property damage losses ranged up to $500 million. City fathers, worried that future investors might be scared off, downplayed the number of casualties. Various figures were bandied about, but they had one thing in common. They were suspiciously low, at least given the magnitude of the disaster. One early estimate claims 667 dead and 352 missing. But pioneering research by San Francisco City librarian Gladys Hansen put the death toll at more than 3,000 people, while recent researchers suggest around 4,000. All generally agree that 250,000 people were rendered homeless. San Francisco's government officials made an attempt to move Chinatown to Hunters Point, a remote location barely within city limits. The plan was foiled in part due to the building plans of local business people. And in fact, one was Luk Ten Eli. Eli was ABC, American-born Chinese, and he hired architects to make his rebuilt store more exotic and Asian-looking. The idea caught on, and the pagoda roofs and other Chinese motifs helped make the restored Chinatown a major tourist attraction. San Francisco has a history of surviving disasters. In the gold rush period, the city burned the ground no less than 6 times between 1849 and 1851. The phoenix was adopted as the city's symbol, a mythical bird that rises reborn from its own ashes. And San Francisco did rise again, and by 1915, it was hosting the Panama Pacific International Exposition. San Francisco survived because of the courage, endurance, and unfailing sense of humor of its citizens. Not long after the disaster, a sign appeared that poked fun at an East Bay rival and summed up the San Francisco spirit. Eat, drink, and be merry. The slogan read, "For tomorrow, we may have to go to Oakland." So indeed, the city did rise again. And of course, we are in the middle of another time when the city needs to come together, and we are doing that. We are in the middle of a pandemic once again, and of course, it was the 1918. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and we are coming together in this city, as people are in many parts of the country, and confronting this deadly virus. And that's what we encourage you to do. Stay home, stay safe, stay healthy. I, as many of you, are tired of being inside, but we know that there's a greater good by staying inside, sheltering in place, and taking the necessary precautions when one goes outside. Don't forget, you are now required, or at least by the 22nd, required by an edict of the city to wear a mask when you go outside. Practice social distancing, stay 6 feet away. Don't rush this. We know we're all anxious to get back to our regular lives, to rise again and have a more normal life. But if we rush this, we take a chance of making things much, much worse. So stay at home, stay safe, stay healthy. Listen to the experts. Don't listen to politicians. They have their own agendas. Don't listen to quack doctors. Don't listen to anyone except somebody with the knowledge to know what we have to do to get through this time. Well, we're getting near the end of this morning's vlog. I see we had 16 people joining us this morning. We would like to thank you. As we said earlier, this will be posted on numerous social media. The Facebook, whatever that is, well, I think that's what we're on now. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, things like that. And don't forget, today's vlog is dedicated to the people who keep us safe. Our city workers, Department of Public Works, but also the fire department, the police department, the EMTs, the people who work in the stores, the people who stock the shelves, work in the warehouses, all risking their lives to help us. And we salute them, all the healthcare workers especially. Don't forget to go outside every night at 7 o'clock and give them a little round of applause. We do dedicate this day also to the survivors of the Great San Francisco earthquake, none of whom are around anymore. Last one passed away in 2016, Bill Del Monte, who we had the privilege of meeting one year. And we just want to thank you for getting up so early. I know some of you missed showing up at Lotta's Fountain, as we always do, and so we felt that this was an important thing to do. And I hope you enjoyed it. Leave some feedback. And it's just about 5:30 a.m. Thank you for joining us today. Stay safe, stay healthy, be kind to each other. Have a wonderful day, and remember. Thank you very much.